Welcome. Thank you so much for attending tonight's Your Child and Healthy Relationships webinar. We're glad you're here. Please take a moment to complete our quick survey and provide your valuable feedback. It will be added to the chat for easy access. If you need to process any of the subjects discussed tonight, or you're looking for resources for yourself or your family, feel free to call the Ohio Health Sexual Assault Response Network of Central Ohio's helpline at 614-267-7020. We've also created a document with all of the various school districts' contact information for you. Just scan the QR code on your screen. And again, welcome to the seminar.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Tully. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the training supervisor at the Center for Family Safety and Healing. I work with middle and high school students and staff at middle schools and high schools to support healthy relationships. Our program addresses teen dating violence, including healthy ways to use technology and digital dating abuse.
Hi, my name is Eliza Sabo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Sexual Violence Prevention Program Coordinator at SARNCO, the Sexual Assault Response Network of Central Ohio, which is the local rape crisis center here in Franklin County. I work with staff and students in Central Ohio middle schools and high schools, and my role is to get in front of a variety of types of interpersonal, power-based violence. We're here tonight to talk about healthy digital and online relationships. The digital world, while challenging and ever-changing, offers many fantastic opportunities for self-expression, knowledge, creativity, communication, and connection. From a parent perspective, of course, there are many pros and cons, some even making a showing in both categories on the basic list that you see on your screen. The conversation and tips shared this evening are offered in the hopes of finding ways to accentuate the positives, the connection, the communication, creativity, and self-expression that's possible online while mitigating and shining a light on some of the potential dangers. Before we look at tips and strategies, Caitlin and I want to share, one each, a frequently asked question related to the topic of safe online habits and relationships as a kind of case study. Caitlin.
Great, thank you, Eliza. So one of the things that I get asked a lot is about TikTok. And TikTok has been an important source of connection and coping for teens during the pandemic because it provides a really important outlet of shared experiences and humor when we've all been really isolated. In fact, TikTok is the most visited website in the world currently, even more popular than Google and Facebook. And some people question, what is this popularity? And many adults think then, well, what about its safety? What about security for my young person? And what about the influence it might have on teen identity and relationships? So we want to start by defining what is TikTok for those out there who may be really confused about how the app works or how it functions. It's a video-based social media platform, and it uses a variety of features and artificial intelligence to create a customized feed. And they call this the FYP or For You page. And what it does is it creates this feed based on how a user watches videos, how they like or maybe even dislike a video, and what they search for. And that means this really complex FYP allows teenagers to see videos even if they don't follow an account. This algorithm is very complex, and it will create, again, a feed that's customized based on teens' interests. So teens may go straight from a really funny video that maybe from a friend or from a celebrity right into an intense feed about topics such as death related to COVID, global crises, or even risky viral trends without a lot of the tools to process them. TikTok conducted a survey and they found that 1 in 5 teens had participated in at least one of these challenges that exist, or these viral trends on the apps. And most of these challenges were fun and silly, like maybe learning a new dance or making silly slime with friends. Finland actually sold out of feta cheese due to a pasta recipe that went viral. So again, this has a global impact, but most of the time they're just fun and silly. But some of the challenges that teens were exposed to encouraged harmful behavior. And this study found that 1 in 50 teens had participated in one of those risky or dangerous challenges. Probably the most popular one, or one that was really made the headlines, was devious licks. And this encouraged boundary crossing behavior like damaging school bathrooms or touching people without their permission. There was also a challenge that was called kissing your best friend, and it encouraged people to kiss their close friend without any conversation around consent. And many teens thought that this was funny or silly, just like those other challenges, but they may not realize that forced kissing is a form of sexual violence. And we know that there were many follow-up videos that were posted where teens said they felt really confused, uncomfortable, and violated by this non-consensual kissing that came from someone so close to them. A lot of the videos are edited with sounds and different features to be really funny or lighthearted, even though those topics are really serious. And that means it can be confusing for teens who have similar experiences. And I've heard that firsthand from students I work with. So given all of these challenges, literally and figuratively, why do teens love TikTok? And what they love about it is the connection, the chance to explore their identity and their interests. And many teens have expressed to me, and this was part of the research study, that they felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves, which is so important during this time where we're all isolated. It also gives us short bursts of dopamine, which we know for a teen's developing brain, this is what we get from shared recognition, from humor, from things that we find shared connection. A survey conducted for TikTok found that 66% of teens sought support for these challenges, whether they were funny or they were serious. So we know that adults, family members, and family friends really have the opportunity to help support teenagers. We can help them navigate TikTok by talking about boundaries. What is maybe we could perceive as funny but may not have the impact of being funny for friends? That's really what boundaries are about and how we can have those conversations, and will be a really important topic tonight. And you can also utilize the app-based tools. So they have digital well-being tools from TikTok that will be included at the end on a resource page. Those include tools like screen time management, media literacy tools, and preventing direct messages from reaching young people if it might be age appropriate to restrict that. So thank you again for the opportunity to kind of walk through some of the aspects of TikTok. Eliza?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So my topic is online gaming. I'm a gamer. I play D&D and Final Fantasy XIV online. And when adults learn about this, be it a school administrator, teachers, or parents, but especially parents, their first question is often about the safety for their kids. How can they protect their child while giving them the chance to relax and enjoy the game? The online gaming world is a huge virtual playground. Kids can log online, use their computer's webcam, and talk to and play with any of the millions of gamers around the world. The size of the playground itself might really surprise you. For example, Final Fantasy XIV, the game I play, has approximately 36 million players worldwide. There are about 110,000 players assigned to each of the 3 North American servers, and when you log on, you can be playing with thousands and thousands of them. And that's really fun. But that's a lot of people, and it's a lot of strangers. So I'll take that a step further and say that these numbers are just in-game numbers. Outside of the game, there are plenty of social media extended gaming communities, both on traditional social media platforms and also on platforms like Discord and Twitch. These are not regulated by in-game rules and regulations and add more possibilities into the mix, pros and cons, good and bad. So how in the world do parents navigate safely with so many strangers potentially playing online with their children? Sometimes I get the question, do I recommend World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and other massively multiplayer online games, which are also known as MMOs, to be considered safe at all? My answer is that I truly believe the good far outweighs the bad, but certain considerations should be taken into account. So here's a question that I like to ask. If your child were going on a trip with the drama club to New York City, where they would know the kids they were traveling with, where there would also be a caring adult nearby, where there would be clear expectation and rules, and where there would be a bit of unknown in the 8.5 million strangers in New York City, how would you, as a parent, prepare your child for such a trip? What advice would you give them so that they could stay safe while also building the excitement around all that the city has to offer? So I think you probably see where I'm going here. The potential for connection, community, relaxation, entertainment, knowledge, and fun in New York City is similar to the same sort of experience in an online MMO game. The potential for danger is also there and is also very real. Now imagine that you know New York City really well. You've visited there a few times, maybe you've even worked there in the past, or maybe you have family in New York City. Is the quality of your advice to your child better for having been to New York City? I'm guessing yes. And so my number one recommendation to you is to join the game with them. You don't have to play forever. In fact, I wouldn't recommend playing with your child forever, but if you join the game and learn more about it, maybe build a character, level up a little bit. You don't have to play with them all the time. You don't even have to get higher than level 10 or maybe 15 to really understand the scope of the world that they're playing with and how the dynamics of the game itself work. This will allow you to check in with them in an informed, genuine, and maybe, most important, in a fun way that doesn't feel awkward. Most MMO games have a generous free trial period, so the cost should be minimal or even zero. One important point for online gaming is to know that there is a very big difference between the game itself and the supporting gaming apps, which are separate from the game. I encourage you to learn more about off-game communication and streaming apps for gamers, like Discord and Twitch. Those are just two of many. These can be more likely to include adult content. And I want to say that again. These off-game communication apps are much more likely to include adult content. So I'll focus on Discord for the sake of this example. If your child is using Discord with gaming friends, then consider reviewing the Discord servers your child is on to be sure that the content there is age appropriate. Let's see here. Talk about what they see on that server. Engage them in a conversation around what they see that they enjoy and that they love, and ask them if there's anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. Maybe consider making an agreement with them that they won't join a Discord server without also inviting you to peek around with them so that you can together have a discussion around how to keep both on and off gaming spaces safe and fun, frankly. This helps you to curate and engage in conversation around the smaller gaming conversations and communities that your child might be a part of. Kids who game tell me that they feel they can't ask questions they have about gaming to their adult family members because adults simply don't get it. They don't have an idea or an interest and no frame of reference past maybe Pac-Man or car racing games from the late 90s. And I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that you devote hours to gaming every day, although I'll warn you, you might fall in love with it. I am simply stating that if your kid plays soccer or basketball or lacrosse, you'd likely learn more about it. If you don't know about online gaming or the last game you played was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, then you might consider the same approach. And your kid will likely really enjoy teaching you something that they're good at and that they love. Or if you're both beginners, it might be a great shared experience to have with them. The final point I usually add on this topic is that the online world is similar to the actual world, the actual physical world. There are great people, great communities, and there are also, as with every school, sport, creative, religious, and other type of community, those that would cause harm or are actively looking to cause harm. So we need to be careful and purposeful in our decisions and in the way we engage and guide young people in our lives in all the communities that they're a part of, both online and in real life too. So my suggestion for navigating gaming experiences with your child requires time and consistent curiosity and conversation. I want to take a second to say, I know how precious your time is and how quickly the days speed by. I get that. I want to present the following to you as a why behind the what. why I believe that consistent curiosity and conversation is key to really knowing how your child is interacting with others on the internet and via text. So, for example, secretly saving photos, videos, and documents in a separate gallery on their cell phone is really easily done. Apps like KeepSafe, Lock My Pics, Calculator, Photo Vault, PhotoGuard, One Gallery are just a few to mention. Most teens admit that they've lied about their age to gain access to websites. They admit that they've received contact from strangers online that made them feel uneasy and uncomfortable, and that they've seen advertising that they felt was inappropriate for them. All in all, this might feel a bit overwhelming as a parent, but the honest reality is that your kids are going to hide things from you in real life and online. And if we're frank with ourselves and we look back at our own teenage years, our own adolescence and childhood, we hid things from our parents too. So this is why leaning into sometimes awkward, challenging conversations early and consistently will help keep an open dialogue and the expectation of involvement from you. In this example, I want to take a second to look at what's on the screen. You see that calculator app. It looks like a calculator on a phone. It looks like a calculator when you open the app. And only if you put the right combination of numbers in does it reveal the photos and videos. So this gets tricky when we start to talk about the topic of sexting. So in this example, talking about what kinds of photographs your child might see online or share or receive via text. And that could be anything from a simple innocent selfie with friends to naked images is really important. Sexy and or naked images in particular are worthy of further discussion with your child because they can be viewed by the law as child pornography. Discussions with your kids on this topic might also include conversations around other related topics such as boundaries, consent, trust, your online reputation, the potential for long-term ramifications of someone else having these images or videos, and perhaps the most important, the natural cycle of many dating and romantic relationships, which includes the likelihood of a breakup. A photo or explicit text sharing between two people can quickly become a viral phenomenon. They are sometimes seen as trophies and are, sadly, gained oftentimes via manipulation. Helping your child to understand the risks of sexting will help them to make better decisions throughout their adolescence and into their adulthood. To get such a conversation started, you might mention an article that you read about it online, or simply ask your child to better explain the phenomenon to you. However the conversation starts, be sure to truly listen to the detail that your child shares, including their impressions of the positive aspects of this. Approaching the conversation with curiosity and non-judgment can make all the difference.
Thank you, Eliza. I think that point about curiosity and connection is so vital when we think about the kind of advice that we can provide to young people. We know that the parts of the brain that are responsible for critical thinking and making judgment is really not developed until late 20s or early 30s. And so asking young people to be able to navigate these complex systems without support is just really unrealistic. And so before you text or before you post or before you add something into a group chat, these are just some important points to consider talking about with your child. Practicing these with you means that they will have this internal dialogue when they're in difficult situations, that they will have your advice and your support. So thinking through these questions, for example, is it kind? What would a safe adult in your life think of this post? Lets them think beyond those impulsive moments where they might feel peer pressure or feel like they want to engage in that text or post or chat, and offers them an alternate solution. One of the things that I actually practice with the teens that I work with is having a moment of pause, building pause in naturally. And for many adults, we might have different strategies that we've built over the years to do that. Young people are, again, going to need a little bit more support. So I like to encourage young people to think about what is the thing that helps you to feel centered or calm when you're feeling dysregulated. Some teens I work with really enjoy apps that are about mindfulness like Calm. Others enjoy sort of a moment of humor or silliness like TikTok, or it may even be with a safe person that they know that they can vent to without the fear of some of those posts or texts being taken out of context. And so really encouraging them to build those in. Another strategy that I reflect on with teens is drafting their thoughts in the Notes app, a place where it can't be sent immediately, and then going and doing that activity that they love, coming back to that Notes app and saying, does this really say what I want it to say? Or is there another way that I could frame this? And so using these talking points with your child as a source of advice can help them to make better, calmer choices when they're in this moment where they may feel a lot of pressure. Thanks, Eliza.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's good advice for adults,
Yes.
too.
I use it myself.
So in our next slide, I just kind of want to touch on the point that acts of interpersonal violence at school, such as bullying, harassment, physical fights, and even sexual assault, often start online the night before or the weekend before. There is such a connection between the school community and the online community. Maybe it's the photo that's carelessly shared, or the gossip that's projected and passed around, or even a text fight that has been copied and pasted into social media, so that two partners are airing a fight for everybody to see. The lines between the social media world and the in-life world are blurred for adolescents. Would you agree, Caitlin?
Yes, thank you, Eliza. Absolutely. What I hear from the students that I work with is that it sort of becomes the Monday morning chatter. It's very similar to what adults might talk about, what happened over the weekend or their favorite television show like water cooler talk. This becomes before school conversation that bleeds in through the day. And so it may be that they're reviewing different screenshots from stories that were posted over the weekend, or there was an event that happened that there's many like social media elements that are being discussed on that Monday morning, and all of a sudden it becomes, well, do I need to defend my friend? And do I do that with the tools that I have, which may include, those verbal or physical altercations that Eliza mentioned, or it may be, this thing that happened, do I tell an adult or do I not? And that becomes sort of the conversation that happens throughout the day. So we definitely see that in the students that I partner with, that there's a lot of elements of the social media conversation that become part of the school conversation.
No, thank you, Caitlin. I completely agree. And I think it's an important comparison, the water cooler comparison. Yes. So let's switch gears now and discuss tips and ideas for parents to use with their kids.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. One of the tips that I think is so important is how we even think about screen time. So before we get into what to do with screen time or what to do with online safety, it's what do we think around screen time? And most of the tools that exist for parents are focused on the quantity. How many hours is your child online? And there are many elements that, parents come to me and they're like, well, I read that if my child spends more than 5 hours online, right, it's going to have a significant impact for them as they grow and as they become adults. And so what do I do with that? And what we really want to be thinking about is the quality of the screen time. What are the social elements of that, screen time? Are you spending 3 hours comparing yourself to a peer or to celebrities or to filtered images, and that's having a negative impact on your self-identity or self-image? That's going to be very different than 3 hours spent connecting with a friend who's moved away from your neighborhood, or from maybe, thinking about new skills that you're building. Like Eliza was talking about, gaming takes a lot of complex thinking skills. And so 3 hours doing that might be, again, very different in terms of its social impact.
But I think that you make an incredible point, because it's easy to say, okay, so 1.5 hours, that's what I'm going to give to my child and that's it.
Yes.
But this is, again, kind of leaning into that discussion with them about, how long is that TV show that you're really into? Or, tell me about what's going on in the game that you're playing right now. Sounds like you might need a little more time or a little less time this week, and maybe we can incorporate X or Y into our plans for the week as well. So this idea of screen quality versus quality, I think, is just incredibly important to set the base work for us.
Thank you, Eliza.
Yeah,
yes,
you're welcome.
that's exactly where I was going with this. So I might add to that. I
Yes, of
apologize
course.
for
No,
my
please do.
momentary lapse in memory. But yes, so talking about this being activity-based rather than quantity-based, and really thinking about, if your own show that you watch, like your favorite Netflix series, and someone just came up and said, well, it's been an hour and now we're going to turn it off. And you're like, well, this is just an important plot point and I'm really engaged in this. And then somebody turned it off, that would be frustrating. And yet when our own young people express frustration, oftentimes parents have a very firm rule about it. Well, your screen time is up. Sorry, that's all that you get today. And that can be really frustrating as children try to manage their screen time. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right. So next up, and before we move on to our Q&A tonight, because we can't wait to hear what your questions are going to be, we'll be looking at a series of tips that might make up a part of a long-term strategy for you and your child. So as with previous examples, these tips are rooted in consistent dialogue and curiosity. Our first tip tonight is consistent curiosity and conversation. So you've heard us reference a non-judgmental, curiosity-based approach a few times this evening. Let's take a moment to look at power dynamics. This is the why behind this piece of advice that we keep offering. Parents do have choices. So one is a power over approach, and this one is based in domination and rules and restrictions. And sometimes that's the right choice. Another choice is a power with approach, which is really different. This one is based on collaboration and conversation and tailored agreements. It's not binary though. It's not just like, well, it's either power over or power with. There are other choices out there too. And there's a third choice that I want to present tonight that's often taken, and that's avoidance. And this is where there are no rules and maybe very little or no dialogue. Parents sometimes share with me that they take a more hands-off approach because their child is the expert in the online world, and they feel uncomfortable because so much of the modern digital world is unknown to them. Our recommendation is to take a power with strategy to digital safety to truly promote safety. This has been proven over and over again to be one of the more effective methods to approaching these conversations and to finding a healthy strategy for you and your family. So our second tip is to watch for mental health warning signs. One thing we haven't talked about yet tonight is the impact of social media on mental health. I encourage you to watch for anxiety related to not being able to check social media, an excessive fear of missing out or FOMO, lying about how much time is being spent online, or even more importantly, a withdrawal from family or friends, or losing interest in real life. These are really important signs that a conversation and a new approach might be needed. So I really recommend that you watch for mental health warning signs in your children. You might want to consider family guidelines such as no phones at meals or Wednesday night game nights without screens, doing tabletop gaming or whatever it might be that your family enjoys. We encourage you to talk to your kids about how social media impacts them and their friends. That simple question of how does social media impact you and your friends can go a long way. Your child is very likely to share some interesting things with you with just that one simple question. All right, Caitlin.
Thank you, Eliza. Thanks for those important points about digital balance, so important for families. Our next tip is about considering software filtering programs. So every family is unique. I often get questions of, should I use a software filtering program or not? I would say it's about your family's values around social media and internet use and what you consider to be safety for your child. We know that online safety is a developmental process, meaning that we need different tools based on the ages and stages of our children. What may be appropriate for an 8-year-old may not be appropriate for an 18-year-old. So for example, children 11 and under, the research really supports that they need what I call training wheels on social media because they really may not have the social, emotional, or cognitive skills to be able to navigate the internet without support. That brain development that I talked about with impulsivity and social pressures, it's really important for those young people to have additional tools. Those might include software filtering programs, like maybe a Google safety review for Android devices, the restriction settings for Apple devices, or even third-party programs like Bark. However, for teenagers, there's really compelling research out of the University of Central Florida that found that teens were actually more likely to experience exposure to pornography, sexual solicitation from adults, or harassment from peers if there was these parental control apps being used. And overwhelmingly, what teens said is that they wanted a safe space to talk about these big issues rather than monitoring software. The other element of that is they also have the ability to get around a lot of those tools as they get older. And so it just really breaks down trust between a caregiver and a child once they enter those middle school and high school years. That leads us into tip 4 about monitoring behavior. Right? And so we might think of monitoring as those software apps, but it includes a lot of other behaviors that we can approach with curiosity. Right? Monitoring behavior online can look like co-viewing with someone, so sitting down and watching a television show and chatting through it together. It can be co-playing, like what Eliza talked about with gaming, or it could be even just expressing interest in the activity. Using phrases that are built in curiosity, like, tell me more about this app, or what's your favorite part of this game, can really help us to build those connections. It's also really helpful to ask teenagers about what their friends or people at school think about different social media. Sometimes they may be fearful that there will be judgment from a caregiver. They're more likely to open up if it feels more general or about what other teenagers are doing. And that means that as adults, we also have a responsibility then to have calm and curious reactions, even if it's about a child that's not our own. Because what teenagers tell me is they're like, well, you know, when I was talking about this activity online, my mom said, oh, that was so silly, or that was so ridiculous. Why would someone do that? They were like, Caitlin, I did that. Does that mean my mom thinks that I'm silly or that I'm ridiculous? And so even the way that we respond to other teenagers makes a big difference in how teenagers think about themselves when it comes to difficult situations or social pressures. Thanks, Eliza.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was really interesting. So we have 2 final tips tonight before we move to our Q&A. Tip number 5 is to set and review healthy restrictions. Ask your child what they feel proper restrictions might look like. Consider no phones or no gaming consoles overnight in their bedrooms, and then maybe even think about doing the same for yourself. Put a quarterly review of privacy settings on the calendar. That's healthy to do for everyone who is online. And then talk about screen time, quality versus quantity, as Caitlin told us earlier, is so important. Ask questions like, how long does it take to watch your favorite show or play your favorite game, etc., while you think about what restrictions might look like. But I think starting with that question about what they think a proper restriction might look like is a great place. Your kids might surprise you. They might come back with no restrictions, but they might actually have some great ideas of their own to share with you. Things that they've heard from other friends, or things that they know that they push the boundary on and that they might need a little bit of help with. Our final tip is to collaborate on crafting a digital contract. And I think the important word there is collaborate. So reviewing this contract from time to time and editing it and amending it as the online world continues to change and your child's interests evolve is just a really great idea, because then everybody's clear about where the boundaries are. And the conversation is open-ended because it's reviewed. So there is a wonderful resource called commonsensemedia.org. Again, that's commonsensemedia.org. And this offers articles and guidance for adults who want to keep their family safe and productive online. It includes a family toolkit. It has an example of what a digital contract might look like. And it was developed in partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we do highly recommend that. And speaking of resources, we have a couple resources here on the screen for you that have been mentioned tonight. One for TikTok, the commonsensemedia.org that I just mentioned, as well as the digital well-being and screen time resources that are built into the devices that our children use. So hopefully these resources will help you on your way. But now we really want to hear from you. This is my favorite part of the evening, the Q&A. So we're going to go back to Melissa. Melissa is joining us tonight from Groveport-Madison School District. Melissa, will you introduce yourself and then let us know if there are any questions in the chat?
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been really enjoyable. Not only as a professional that comes alongside students and kids, but as a parent. I myself have 3 teenage children, and I think this has been really helpful. So my name is Melissa Nimi Nathan, and I'm the coordinator for student well-being and student support with Groveport-Madison Schools. So let's see if there's any questions that have come through yet. So not yet, nothing from you all. We'd love to hear from you. So in the meantime, do either one of you guys have
a question?
A question that might,
I think I'd like to ask Caitlin. Caitlin, I know that you work in depth on this particular topic. So when you think about your own lived experience as an educator on the topic of like being safe, we touched obviously on TikTok and online gaming, but what is another topic that you often get questions from parents about?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what I've seen a lot of is about location services and this idea that friends feel real in a digital space to young people where they may not know them in real life. And so the line of who your friend is or who is part of your circle is very complicated for young people, especially during a pandemic where so many of our social connections were online based. Those friends feel very real. And so sharing your location on Snapchat with somebody who you don't know in real life would raise a lot of red flags for adults. They may not raise the same flags for young people. And so talking through those safety concerns of who is it okay to share location services with or not is a really important conversation. And we encourage really critical thinking around that because there may be moments where those location services help young people to navigate complex situations. Their friend knows where they are, their family members might know where they are, versus is somebody asking for that information and using power and control dynamics to access that, which could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a dating partner. And so talking through the complex issues related to location services is something that parents may not always think about. Because they have their own ideas around what is safe and not safe. And they're like, well, clearly my child would feel the same way. Well, the reality is that's not true. And so having a discussion about it as a family can be really beneficial to make sure that safety is considered all around.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I know we've talked before too about teen dating relationships and location services. We've chatted about that before too. I've heard you speak very eloquently in the past about the confusion that can come from a parent who wants to have location services and that being a healthy and positive thing versus the dating partner who wants to have location services on and how that can be potentially a negative thing or a sign of an unhealthy relationship. Can you speak more about that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's become really normalized for us to use a lot of different apps that have location services built in. I think the most popular one that families utilize is Life 360, which has information even down to how fast a young person is driving their car.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's very specific information that's shared. And parents do this for a number of reasons, but overwhelmingly what I hear from parents is, I do this because I want my child to be safe, because I love them, and because I care for them. What happens inadvertently is then those behaviors are modeled for a dating partner. I had a young person in class one time say, well, my dating partner wants to track my location on Snap Maps. And they say it's because they love me and because they care about me and they want me to be safe, which is the same message that I have from my parent about Life 360. And she's like, Caitlin, what's the difference? Right? And we have to talk through the nuance of a parent having responsibility for a young person versus a dating partner. But it's also then, I think, a great opportunity for parents to really reflect on what message am I sending when I'm utilizing these tracking services? Is this part of my family's values around social media? And I can't answer that for families, but it's a really important moment of reflection. Where if that is something that your family is utilizing, and you believe that those messages are being, transferred to your child, just be thinking through what does that mean then for their peer relationships and for dating relationships, and how to navigate that differently.
Those are big questions.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Melissa, any other questions in our chat?
Yeah, it looks like there is one that came in. A friend of mine has a social media contract with their child. What do you think about this strategy?
Yes, such an important one. Eliza, do you mind if I kick us off?
Please.
And then I'll pass it back over to you. Yeah, so what's so wonderful about a contract is it's really a space to dialogue. The same curiosity and connection that Eliza mentioned throughout the presentation tonight is built into a contract. It's a space to really dialogue around what are our values, or if there's a disconnect between a caregiver's values and a child's value, how can we work through that? And it's really wonderful because a lot of times we have assumptions or bias based on our lived experience, right? If you're an adult and you've never had to navigate the social scene of Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, you're going to have your own ways of thinking through that. And what a contract does is allows your child to share that in a non-judgmental way and find a space where you can create rules that you both can live with and can help support safety.
Yeah.
Eliza, anything you'd add to that?
I don't think so. I earlier had mentioned how it's coming together as a family community. It's a conversation that is collaborative, and I think that that's just really important. It makes it more likely to succeed.
Yes, definitely.
Much more likely to succeed.
Could you give us an example, potentially, Caitlin, of what that would look like, or have you seen templates to help guide parents with creating something like that?
Absolutely. So again, commonsensemedia.org has a wonderful opportunity to use the toolkit or a sample version of that contract and walk through it. But I think what I love about it is it really talks about, what are a child's interests and how can these safety rules or guidelines help to support safety in important ways. Because it's not about trying to have control over what a child does. It really roots safety as an overall goal. And I think that helps young people to feel heard. I had a young person whose parents used this contract and really approached it in that curious, non-judgmental way of, what would help you to get out of tricky situations. So a contract could be a great place to talk about what I call exit strategies. So when you're in an uncomfortable situation, what's the family's code word? What do you say if you feel pressure to FaceTime and you're just not feeling it, but you don't want to seem uncool with your friends? Well, then you text your, parent or adult, hey, did you pick up those kiwis from the store, right? And that kiwis means, which we may not talk about in normal conversation, means, hey, I really don't want to do this. Can you tell me no? And then they maybe call or text their parent, and the parent becomes the so-called bad guy. But what that does is really reinforces the connection between parent and child. And that makes it so that you're a united front against some of these things that can cross safety boundaries. And another thing that I think is really great in a device or social media contract is playing what-if games. So what if you were in a situation where someone asked for your address? What if you were in a situation where your school was in the background of your TikTok video and you got a direct message from someone saying, hey, I go to that school too, do you want to meet up? Right? And so really thinking through some of those skills that we want to build for young people, because we know it's not just that, teenagers turn 18 or our children grow up and they've naturally built these skills. They really need a lot of guidance from adults to be able to have those skills built over time.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the what-if scenarios, because I think that the what-if scenarios give us a very safe place to have a conversation about what you will do, so that when it happens, it's not the first time and there's not a moment of freezing. You're like, okay, wait, we've talked about this. I know what I'm going to do. I have this plan, and everybody's just more prepared. And so then you can relax back into enjoying social media, enjoying the online world, because you know you've got this plan. And if something comes up that wasn't a part of the plan, then you can bring it up because there's dialogue.
I also think it normalizes for kids that there's it's not shameful if somebody were to you know, ask for your address, or it's, you know, because I think so easily people, but kids, young people go towards shame, and then they don't want to share because they feel like, oh, I think I've done something wrong that I ended up in this position. And so when we do say, expect that, like, you're probably going to end up in X, Y, and Z situation.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Right.
Let's know. And not to say, like, so I expect that, like, there are a lot of, like you said, Eliza, you know, in New York City, a lot of wonderful, good, safe people.
Right.
And a lot of kind of shady people.
Yes, exactly.
And you can expect that. And so let's, like, learn how to navigate that world with confidence.
Yes.
So I do think too, like, giving those scenarios not only, like, is practice for the actual, but it normalizes that this isn't like, this doesn't belong to you. You didn't do something wrong to end up in this situation. There's just risks that are associated with living in the world.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, thank you for
So,
that.
Yeah. Looks like there's another. Oh, can you give some tips on how to talk to my child about their own privacy settings?
Yes, absolutely. So depending on the device that your child has, so if they have an Apple product, actually the restrictions page, if you visit apple.com, you can look and it'll walk you through a variety of settings. And they even have some tips for parents about how to talk through those settings and what to do. I always really like to approach that topic by looking at microphone access. Oftentimes young people are amazed at what they have as allowed to access their microphone or their location services, and just being able to share that helps young people to say, like, oh, I thought my phone was an extension of myself, but really I'm granting so much access to these apps or to these sites. And that can be a really wonderful sort of platform to begin those safety conversations. If your child is using an Android product, then there is a Google safety review if you go to safety.google.com. And so it's just really great to be able to walk through those pieces and think through, what does safety mean in terms of my child's device? And what are some of the built-in features that can help support that safety that young people can use, as well as what is my child interested in terms of safety? Maybe they've already encountered situations, or they've had a friend who's encountered situations, and so it can help to bring that conversation forward. Eliza, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would just add that sometimes it's more simple when you approach this conversation for the first time to turn everything off and then to walk through and be like, okay, so now we're thinking about this app. How is that different? Do you want this one on or off? And then just going through app by app by app, maybe, you know, over the course of a week, and looking at each one, or maybe over the course of coffee. I don't know.
Yes.
There could be a lot of apps on some of the children's phones, but sometimes it's easier to just turn everything off and then to go through and really talk about how each app is used and whether or not the answer is yes to the various permissions. So that's just a tip too.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So there's another question. What are some ways, some practical ways to help my child learn how to balance their own time online so that the parent isn't, you know, the one providing the clear, but for themselves to begin to balance time online?
Yeah, I'm happy to start that one if you'd like. Okay, so I think that one of the great tips that I learned from a parent themselves was that they had their child map out everything that they love, everything that kind of lights them up, everything that they enjoy in life, not just online stuff, but, you know, going for walks, watching baseball on TV, watching baseball live, whatever it might be, all of the things that light them up and give them enjoyment. And then, you know, visually, they did this on a large piece of paper, kind of breaking it up in that pie imagery of, like, how much of your time does it make sense to devote to X, Y, and Z, right? And we're just talking about the time that we're allotted in life to enjoy things, not the time that we need to spend brushing our teeth and doing homework and doing all the other things in life, but the time that we get as adolescents or as adults, where we get to enjoy things. How are we spending that? Let's be more deliberate about it. And so I love this idea of just starting with like, these are the things that light me up. These are the things I love. And now let's really talk about like what that looks like. And then stepping back and looking at that pie and say, is this balanced, right? Is that too big a piece of the pie? And having that conversation then with a visual to help. So that's an idea, a strategy that you might consider. How about you, Caitlin? Any ideas?
Yeah, I love that. And just to add, I think what I appreciate about that strategy is the joy and the connection that's found in all of those elements of looking at digital well-being. Because what I hear from a lot of young people, especially teenagers, is what Melissa mentioned earlier about that shame. Even the language we use around some of the things that young people do online, guilty pleasure, trash TV, garbage on YouTube. These are things that young people internalize as like, well, maybe I shouldn't be watching that, or maybe that's not good for me, like junk food basically on social media. And what happens then is they watch it, feel guilty about it, and then watch even more of it. So if we can take that approach of, this is an important part of life. Finding humor, connection, laughing at a TikTok video brings us joy. Right. And if we have a piece of the puzzle for that or a piece of the pie for that, that's really great. And there isn't that shame or that blame associated with it. So I think that's a really wonderful approach to digital well-being. As far as helping to support young people who, again, may not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex and need a little bit some more support in that dialogue, there are built-in digital well-being tools in all of the apps that exist, particularly ones that are feed-based where you really could scroll through videos for hours and hours. They have digital well-being tools for TikTok and for YouTube. Those are the big spaces where teenagers kind of operate. And so I would definitely encourage parents to help support their young person in navigating those settings. What does that look like? Even, for example, on TikTok, there are built in to the algorithm videos that pop up. So even if they haven't set digital well-being tools, there's a video that pops up and says, hey friend, I know TikTok is wonderful. I know this is great, but maybe find another piece of that pie that you're interested in. And so I definitely think encouraging young people to pay attention to those messages, a really great way of kind of navigating it.
Helpful. So looks like we probably have time at least for one more question. And this question is about age appropriateness. So what age do you feel like is best for children to have access to social media apps like TikTok and YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great question. Eliza, do you mind if I
Please,
kick us off?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is one of my big passions around looking at online safety as a developmental process. So really thinking about your own child and their skill set and their ability to navigate kind of complex situations. For something like YouTube, there is something that has more restrictions like YouTube Kids. For many tweens and younger, that's a more appropriate app simply because the algorithm can really direct young people into videos that they did not intend to watch. I have an 18-month-old, and I even find that we might be watching one cartoon or one show together. I'm really about the co-viewing and co-playing at this stage. And all of a sudden, a sort of knockoff version of the Sesame Street show that we were watching pops up. And I'm like, what if I wasn't watching this with my child? And YouTube Kids helps prevent those videos from popping up. So if you can't co-view or you can't co-play with your child, utilizing those kid-centric social media apps is really important, especially for younger kids, 11 and under, those kind of training wheels. And then as tweens get older, there's a lot of ideas around this in the community and a lot of evidence that supports about 13 as the age that is appropriate. Now, most young people will want to access social media like TikTok or YouTube before 13. And so again, having that parental support to help set up accounts can make a really big difference. So again, those training wheels or those supports are vital for online safety. Yeah.
Great.
Anything you'd add on
No,
that?
I think that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions, Melissa? I don't think maybe.
It doesn't look like, it looks like we've answered all of the questions.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both, and thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for attending tonight's seminar. If you need support or resources for yourself or for your child, please don't hesitate to reach out to SARNCO's 24-hour helpline at 614-267-7020. We've also created a document with all of the various school districts' contact information for you. To access it, just scan the QR code on your screen. Finally, we hope you found value, knowledge, and inspiration in this session. We've placed a short survey link in the chat, and we'd love to get your feedback. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.